The morning sun cast strange shadows through the dying crystal trees of Zephyria. Elder researcher Kithara walked slowly through what had once been the most beautiful forest on their world. Now the trees stood like broken glass, their once bright cores turned black and empty. The plague had taken them all. Kithara's translucent skin showed the blue veins of worry beneath. Through her clear flesh, her organs pulsed with the quick rhythm of fear. She had lived for 300 years, but had never seen anything like this destruction. The plague had started small. Just a few trees in the southern forests began to dim. The Zephyrian scientists thought it was a simple fungus problem. They tried their usual gentle treatments, singing to the trees, adjusting the soil chemistry, adding helpful bacteria. Nothing worked. Within weeks, the infection spread to entire forests. The crystal trees that formed the backbone of Zephyrian civilization began dying everywhere. These trees were not just plants, they were the foundation of everything. The Zephyrians grew their cities from living crystal. Their technology was biological, powered by the life force of the great forests. Their ships were grown, not built. Their computers were living coral that thought and calculated. Now it was all dying. Kithara reached the central grove where the council met. The great meeting tree, once tall enough to touch the clouds, now stood half its original height. Its crystal branches had fallen like broken glass across the forest floor. Elder Kithara, called council leader Vethan. His normally bright skin had turned pale with stress. The reports from the northern continent have arrived. The plague has reached the capital city. Kithara felt her heart skip a beat. She had two hearts like all Zephyrians, and both now beat out of rhythm with fear. How long before the biocomputers fail? Perhaps 10 days, maybe less. 10 days. In 10 days, their entire civilization would shut down. No power, no communications, no life support for their orbital stations. The billions of Zephyrians living in space would slowly suffocate as their bioships died around them. What about the cure research? Kithara asked. Vethan's skin flickered with the dark patterns that showed deep sadness. Dr. Mithera's team tried everything. They exposed samples to every frequency of light. They tested thousands of chemical combinations. They even tried relocating healthy trees to sterile environments. Nothing stops it. Kithara walked to the ancient quantum communication array at the center of the grove. The device was old, built by her people's ancestors long ago when they first reached the stars. It could send messages across the galaxy, but using it required enormous energy. The council had banned its use except for the greatest emergencies. Elder, Vethan said carefully, surely you are not considering. I am. Kithara placed her hands on the control crystals. They felt cold and lifeless under her touch. Soon they would die too, like everything else. We have tried everything our people know. We have exhausted our science, our wisdom, our gentle ways. If we are to survive, we need help from outside. But the power cost will kill the remaining trees faster. The trees are already dying. At least this way someone might save our people. Kithara began the activation sequence. The array hummed to life, drawing power from the dying forest around them. She could feel the trees giving their last energy to power her message. It felt like murder, but it was their only hope. She composed the message carefully. It needed to be simple, urgent, and clear to any species that received it. She spoke in Old Galactic, the trade language most civilizations understood. This is Elder Researcher Kithara of the Zephyrian Republic. Our world is dying. A plague has infected our crystal forests. Our biotechnology is failing. Our people face extinction within days. We have tried everything our science knows. We need help. Please, anyone who receives this message, if you have knowledge of biological plagues or planet-wide infections, we beg for your assistance. Our coordinates follow this message. We do not have long. She added their exact location and broadcast the message in all directions across the galaxy. The quantum array sent the signal faster than light, reaching distant star systems in minutes instead of years. The effort drained the last power from the grove. Around them, the remaining trees flickered and went dark. Kithara collapsed, exhausted. It is done, she whispered. The council members helped her to her feet. Vethin looked around at the now dead grove with horror. "Elder, what if no one answers? What if no one can help? We have just used our last power reserves. Then we die knowing we tried everything." Kythera straightened her robes. "But someone will answer. The galaxy is vast and full of many species. Surely someone has faced this problem before." They waited. Hours passed. The Zephyrian communication stations around the planet listened for any response. Their deep space monitors watched for incoming ships. On the second day, they detected several responses. The Etherian Philosophy Council sent a message of sympathy, but explained they could only offer spiritual comfort. The Yith Collective's reply was longer and more detailed, but their solution involved completely abandoning the planet and starting over elsewhere. The Merchant Guild offered to evacuate Zephyrian survivors for a price the dying world could not pay. None of the responses offered real help. On the third day, their deep space sensors detected something impossible. Ships were approaching their system at incredible speed, decelerating from nearly the speed of light. The sensors counted 12 massive vessels, each one larger than the biggest Zephyrian city ship. But these ships looked wrong. They were not grown like proper vessels should be. They appeared to be assembled from dead metal, welded and bolted together like crude tools. They leaked radiation in patterns that would be lethal to most known species. The lead ship sent a communication on standard galactic frequencies. The voice that spoke was harsh and strange, using sounds no Zephyrian throat could make. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress call. Maintain current position and prepare for contact. We are coming to help." Kythera stood in the communication center, staring at the translation on her screen. "Terran? What is a Terran?" The communication officer, a young Zephyrian named Seleth, ran searches through their databases. "Elder, I can find no record of this species. No trade records, no diplomatic contact, no scientific exchanges. According to our databases, Terrans do not exist. But their ships are real. Our sensors confirm 12 vessels approaching at combat speed." Combat speed? Vethin had arrived and overheard. Why would rescue ships approach at combat speed? Kythera watched the sensor readings. The unknown ships moved with purpose and power that suggested they were prepared for war, not mercy. But they had answered the call for help when no one else would. "Send a response," she ordered. "Tell them we are grateful for their response and ask about their experience with biological plagues." The reply came back within minutes. The translation made Kythera's blood turn cold. "We have dealt with 12 planetary extinction events in the past 100 years. Some of them were our own worlds. We know how to handle biological threats. Prepare your people for evacuation procedures. This is going to get intense." As the strange metal ships entered orbit around Zephyria, Kythera realized that her desperate call for help had been answered by something no Zephyrian had ever encountered before, something that spoke of war and extinction as casually as discussing the weather, something that called itself human. Against the protests of half the council, Kythera gave the humans permission to begin their work. What happened next destroyed everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about life, medicine, and survival. The humans worked like no species the Zephyrians had ever encountered. They did not rest in the synchronized cycles that all civilized beings followed. Instead, they worked in something they called shifts. Some humans would work while others slept, maintaining constant activity around the clock. Dr. Okafor set up his research station in the most contaminated section of the dying forest. This area was so poisoned that Zephyrian scientists could only visit it wearing full environmental suits for minutes at a time. The toxins in the air would dissolve Zephyrian bioarmor within an hour. The humans walked into it wearing simple cloth masks. "Elder Kythera," Dr. Mithera reported with horror in her voice. "The human scientist is working directly with plague samples using only basic protective gear. He should be dead within minutes." Kythera watched the humans through her monitoring station. Dr. Okafor was collecting samples of infected crystal with his bare hands, wearing only thin gloves and safety glasses. The level of contamination around him would have killed any Zephyrian instantly. "How are they surviving?" she asked. Captain Tanaka, who was coordinating the operation from a temporary base camp, overheard the question. Dr. Okafor grew up on a world where the rain was mildly acidic and the air contained heavy metals. This environment is actually cleaner than his childhood home. The statement was so impossible that Kithara thought the translation had failed. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The doctor's home planet had environmental conditions that would kill most galactic species. Humans adapt to harsh environments. We evolve fast and we learn to survive in places other species cannot imagine living. Dr. Mithera was studying the sensor readings from the human worksite. Elder, according to our instruments, Dr. Okafor has deliberately exposed himself to plague samples. He injected himself with a diluted form of the biological agent. Kithara felt her heart stop. He did what? Captain Tanaka explained with the same casual tone she used for everything else. Controlled exposure. The doctor's immune system will analyze the plague and develop antibodies. In 3 days, he will be immune to the infection. But he could die. Yes, but probably not. Dr. Okafor has survived exposure to 47 different biological weapons and 32 planetary diseases. His immune system is very experienced. The concept was so alien that Kithara struggled to understand it. Zephyrian medicine was based on prevention and gentle treatment. They used biofilters to keep diseases away from their bodies. They treated illness with careful biological adjustments and symbiotic organisms that repaired damage without stress. The idea of deliberately infecting oneself with a deadly disease was not just dangerous. It was insane. But it worked. Within 2 days, Dr. Okafor was walking through the contaminated areas without any protection at all. His body had somehow adapted to tolerate toxins that would dissolve Zephyrian tissue. More impossibly, he was taking samples directly from his own blood to create treatments. The human's blood now contains antibodies to the plague, Dr. Mithera reported. But Elder, the process should have killed him 3 times over. Kithara was beginning to understand something terrible about these humans. They survived by becoming more dangerous than the things trying to kill them. The real shock came when Dr. Okafor explained his treatment plan to the assembled Zephyrian scientists. The plague cannot survive in environments with high oxygen content and moderate radiation levels, he said, standing before a room full of horrified researchers. The cure is simple. We flood the infected areas with concentrated oxygen while exposing them to controlled nuclear radiation. Dr. Mithera spoke for the entire scientific community when she whispered, "That would be fatal to all known life forms." "Fatal to most life forms," Dr. Okafor corrected. "Not to humans. We will personally oversee the treatment while your people evacuate to safe orbital habitats." The radiation levels he was proposing would cook Zephyrian cells within minutes. The oxygen concentration would cause their respiratory systems to shut down from toxicity. The humans were proposing to turn their world into an environment that no civilized species could survive. "How do you expect to live in those conditions?" asked Council Leader Vethan. Dr. Okafor seemed surprised by the question. "Environmental suits and radiation shielding, standard equipment for hostile environment operations." Sergeant Santos, who had been quietly listening, added her own terrifying perspective. "On my home world, we called conditions like that Tuesday morning. The radiation will be about half what we get during summer months on New Texas." Kithara stared at the human soldier. "You come from a world where deadly radiation is normal weather?" "Deadly to you, maybe. Humans evolved on a planet with dangerous weather, predatory animals, and natural disasters. We learn to survive in environments that kill other species. That is why we are good at cleaning up biological disasters." The humans showed them video records of their previous rescue operations. The Zephyrians watched in mounting horror as human teams worked in environments that looked like hell. Humans walking through acid rain wearing simple protective gear. Humans working in temperatures that would melt Zephyrian bioequipment. Humans surviving in toxic atmospheres that would dissolve most known life forms. "This is from our operation on Kepler 442b, Captain Tanaka explained as they watched humans working in a landscape of broken metal and corrosive fog. The nanoplague was eating everything made of metal. We had to work in full radiation suits for 3 months while we deployed biological countermeasures. "How many of your people died?" asked Dr. Mithera. 2. One from equipment failure, one from an accident with the sterilization charges. Very low casualties for a Class 7 biohazard operation. The humans spoke of death and survival with the same casual tone other species used to discuss crop rotation. They had lost people on these missions, but they spoke of it as an acceptable cost of business. We have a saying, Dr. Okafor explained to the stunned Zephyrian scientists. What does not kill you makes you stronger. Humans have survived by learning from every disaster, every disease, every environmental threat we encounter. Each challenge makes us better at handling the next one. Kithara finally understood what they were dealing with. These humans did not come from a normal world. They came from a place so dangerous that survival required becoming something that could thrive in deadly conditions. They were the product of a world that tried to kill them every day. And they had won. Elder, Dr. Mithera said quietly, if we allow them to proceed, they will flood our world with enough radiation to sterilize the surface. Everything will be changed. The crystal forests will never grow the same way again. But our people will live, Kithara replied. And perhaps we will learn something from these humans about the value of strength. Captain Tanaka was reviewing the treatment timeline on her handheld computer. We can begin evacuation procedures tomorrow. The orbital habitats will take 2 weeks to construct. Decontamination starts as soon as your people are safely off-world. How do we know you will not simply take our planet for yourselves once we are gone? Council Leader Vethan asked suspiciously. The humans looked genuinely confused by the question. Sergeant Santos answered with obvious sincerity. We have 12 worlds of our own, each one more dangerous and interesting than this place. We do not need your planet. We came because you called for help. Dr. Okafor nodded agreement. Humans have a rule. We help when help is needed. We do not take payment for disaster relief. As Kithara watched these strange, violent, compassionate beings prepare to save her world using methods that terrified her, she realized that the galaxy was far stranger than any Zephyrian had ever imagined. And perhaps that was exactly what they needed to survive. The human ships had been in orbit for 6 hours, and Kithara was beginning to understand why no one in the galaxy had heard of these Terrans before. Everything about them was wrong. Their ships did not follow any known design principles. Where Zephyrian vessels were grown from living crystal and shaped by biological processes, these human ships looked like they had been hammered together from raw metal. They had sharp angles and straight lines. They leaked energy signatures that would poison most species. Worse, they were heavily armed. Elder, reported Silith from the sensor station, the human vessels carry weapons we cannot identify. The energy readings suggest they could destroy our entire orbital platform with a single shot. Kithara felt both her hearts racing. In 50,000 years of Zephyrian history, no one had ever brought weapons to a rescue operation. When civilized species helped each other, they brought medical supplies, food, and scientific equipment. They did not bring tools of war. Have they made any hostile moves? She asked. No, Elder. They remain in defensive formation around our planet, but their scanning beams are intense. They are examining our world more thoroughly than our own scientists ever have. The communication system chimed with an incoming message. The harsh human voice spoke again, and this time the translation was longer and more detailed. Zephyrian leadership. This is Admiral Chen. We have completed our initial planetary scan. We have identified the biological agent causing your extinction event. We are prepared to begin immediate intervention, but we need to land ground teams on your surface. Repeat, we need to put armed personnel on your planet. Please confirm your authorization for this procedure. The council chamber fell silent. Council Leader Vethan was the first to speak, his voice shaking with disbelief. Armed personnel? They want to put soldiers on our world? Kithara stared at the message. In all of galactic history, no civilization had ever requested permission to land military forces as part of a rescue mission. The very concept was barbaric. When the Yeath had helped the crystalline worlds fight their asteroid plague, they had done it from space using careful energy beams. When the Etherians had saved the floating cities of Gossamer Prime, they had used meditation and biological adjustment. Elder, said Dr. Mithera, who had just arrived from the research labs. Perhaps they simply translate their words poorly. Maybe they mean scientists or medical personnel. Kithara activated the communication array. Admiral Chen, this is Elder Kithara. When you say armed personnel, do you mean scientific teams carrying research equipment? The human response came back immediately, and the tone was matter-of-fact in a way that chilled Zephyrian hearts. Negative. I mean combat troops carrying weapons, environmental suits, and military engineering equipment. The biological agent on your planet is highly aggressive and potentially hostile. Our people will need protection while they work. We do not go anywhere unarmed. Council Leader Vethan stood up so quickly his chair fell over. This is madness. They want to invade our world. They want to save our world, Kithara corrected, though she felt sick saying it. But they do it their way. She opened communication again. Admiral Chen, in our culture, weapons are forbidden on the sacred soil of Zephyria. No one has carried tools of violence on our world for 20,000 years. Then you are about to go extinct because of that policy. The biological agent we are tracking has elements that suggest it might be artificially designed. It could be a weapon. My people do not walk into potential combat situations without protection. Either you let us do this our way or you die your way. Your choice. The bluntness of the statement hit the council like a physical blow. Civilized species did not speak to each other like this. Diplomatic language was supposed to be gentle, respectful, full of careful phrases that avoided offense. These humans spoke like they were discussing the weather. Elder, whispered Vethan, we cannot allow armed aliens on our planet. It would violate every sacred law we have. Kithara looked around the council chamber. Through the crystal walls, she could see the dying city beyond. The biolights were failing one by one as the plague spread through the urban crystal network. In the distance, a great residential tower was collapsing as its living supports finally gave up. Our laws were written for a world that was not dying, she said finally. Send them permission to land. The first human shuttle arrived 3 hours later. It was ugly and functional, built from the same dead metal as their ships. As it descended through the atmosphere, it left a trail of exhaust that made Zephyrian environmental sensors scream warnings. The shuttle landed in the ceremonial grove outside the capital city. Kithara and a small delegation of council members waited to greet their saviors. What emerged from the shuttle was shocking. The humans were small and compact, barely reaching the chest height of an average Zephyrian. Their skin was thick and opaque, hiding their internal organs completely. They moved with quick, efficient motions that spoke of barely contained violence, and they were obviously armed. The lead human removed her helmet, revealing short gray hair and hard brown eyes. Her face was marked with lines that suggested she had seen terrible things and survived them. I am Captain Yuki Tanaka, she said in accented Galactic Standard. This is Dr. James Okafor, our biological specialist, and Sergeant Maria Santos, my security chief. Kithara tried not to stare at the weapons the humans carried. They were clearly designed to kill living beings efficiently. Captain Tanaka, I am Elder Researcher Kithara. We welcome you to our world and thank you for answering our call for help. Captain Tanaka looked around at the dying crystal forest with professional assessment. How long since the plague started? 6 months in the outer regions, 3 months in the populated areas. Dr. Okafor was scanning the dying trees with a handheld device that beeped constantly. Fascinating. The biological agent is breaking down the crystalline matrix at the molecular level. It is like a cancer designed specifically for your technology. Can you cure it? Asked Kithara. The humans exchanged glances. Sergeant Santos spoke for the first time, her voice carrying an accent Kithara could not identify. We have seen worse. On Kepler 442b, we dealt with a nanoplague that ate metal. On Ross 128b, we fought a fungus that dissolved human bone. This is nasty, but it is not the worst thing we have encountered. You have faced extinction events before? Council Leader Vethan asked. Captain Tanaka nodded. 12 times in the past century. Sometimes our own colonies. Sometimes other species who called for help. Sometimes we won. Sometimes we evacuated what we could and sterilized the planet to prevent spread. The casual way she spoke of destroying entire worlds made the Zephyrian delegation step back in horror. Dr. Okafor was still scanning. The good news is that this plague has obvious weaknesses. It cannot survive in high radiation environments or extreme heat. The bad news is that treating it will require conditions that would be lethal to your species. What do you mean? Kithara asked. We will need to flood infected areas with controlled radiation while raising the temperature to levels that would cook Zephyrian tissue. Your people will need to evacuate completely while we work. Captain Tanaka checked her scanner and pointed toward the capital city. How many population centers are affected? All of them, Kithara admitted. The plague has reached every major city and most rural settlements. Then we evacuate your entire planet, Captain Tanaka said matter-of-factly. We build temporary orbital habitats and move everyone off-world while we sterilize the surface. The Zephyrian Council stood in stunned silence. These humans spoke of evacuating billions of people and irradiating an entire planet as if they were discussing lunch plans. How long would this take? Cathara asked weakly. 6 months for the evacuation, another 6 months for treatment and decontamination. 1 year total. Dr. Okafor looked up from his scanner. Actually, Captain, I am reading some interesting energy signatures from the plague samples. This might be faster than we thought. If we use the new fusion cleansing protocols, we could have this world habitable again in 4 months. Fusion cleansing? Bethan whispered. Sergeant Santos grinned, showing white teeth that looked disturbingly sharp. We drop controlled fusion charges to sterilize large areas quickly. Very effective against biological threats. Very impressive fireworks. As Kithara watched these strange, violent aliens discuss casually destroying and rebuilding her entire world, she realized that salvation had come wearing the face of everything her people had been taught to fear. But her people were dying, and these terrifying creatures offered life. The evacuation began at dawn on the 7th day after the humans arrived. Kithara watched from the bridge of the lead human ship as millions of Zephyrians were transported to hastily built orbital habitats. The humans worked with frightening efficiency. Their construction ships assembled living spaces in orbit faster than Zephyrian engineers had thought possible. Where it took Zephyrian bioarchitects months to grow a single habitat module, human teams welded together massive structures in days. How are you building so quickly? Kathara asked Admiral Chen as they watched another habitat module lock into place. Prefabricated components, the Admiral replied. We build standard designs that can be assembled quickly in emergency situations. We learned this technique during the Titan colony disaster. What was the Titan colony disaster? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, watching her people work. Solar flares sterilized one of our agricultural worlds. We had 4 days to evacuate 2 million colonists before the radiation killed them all. We saved 90%. The casual way she mentioned losing 200,000 people made Kithara's skin turn pale. These humans spoke of massive death as if it were a mild disappointment, but they also spoke of saving nearly 2 million as if it were simply what civilized beings did. Down on the planet's surface, the real work was beginning. Human teams in radiation suits spread across the infected continents carrying equipment that Zephyrian scientists did not recognize. They moved with military precision, setting up control stations and deploying devices that hummed with dangerous energy. Dr. Okafor coordinated the operation from a mobile command center that could survive conditions lethal to any other known species. His team included specialists who seemed to treat deadly environments as normal working conditions. Atmospheric processors are online, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's environmental engineer. We can begin oxygen flooding on your command. Radiation deployment teams ready? Confirmed Lieutenant Commander Torres. Fusion charges positioned at optimal sites. Kithiara listened to the communications with growing horror. The humans were preparing to transform her world into something no civilized species could survive. Dr. Okafor, she transmitted from orbit, are you certain this will not permanently damage our planet? Elder Kithara, he replied calmly, we are essentially giving your world a controlled fever. High temperature and radiation will kill the plague, then conditions will return to normal. Your crystal forests will regrow healthier and stronger, but the radiation levels will peak at approximately 40% of normal background. Radiation on my homeworld of New Lagos, dangerous to your species, harmless to humans, fatal to the biological plague. Sergeant Santos added her own reassurance from a forward position. Elder, we have done this treatment on 17 worlds. 15 are now thriving colonies. 2 were too damaged to save, but the treatment stopped the spread to neighboring systems. The treatment began with the atmospheric processors. Human teams activated devices that began pumping concentrated oxygen into the infected areas. The oxygen levels quickly reached concentrations that would have been toxic to Zephyrian respiratory systems. Then came the radiation. Kithara watched through orbital telescopes as controlled fusion charges detonated across the infected continents. From space, the explosions looked like tiny stars blooming on the surface of her world. Each blast released precisely calculated amounts of radiation designed to sterilize biological contamination without permanently damaging the environment. What horrified her was watching the human team's work. Directly in the aftermath of these explosions, Elder, reported Dr. Mathera from the monitoring station. The human teams are entering the radiation zones immediately after detonation. The exposure levels should kill them within minutes, but the humans did not die. They worked methodically through areas that glowed with residual radiation, testing soil samples and monitoring atmospheric conditions. Their equipment protected them from energy levels that would have vaporized Zephyrian bioarmor. Dr. Okafor explained the process during his daily briefings. We monitor contamination levels in real time. When radiation drops to safe levels, we deploy biological restoration agents. The process is very precise. Safe levels for whom? Kithara asked. Safe for us. Still lethal to your people for approximately 6 months, but we can work there immediately. The other galactic civilizations were horrified by what they saw. The Etherian embassy sent urgent messages condemning the human methods as ecological barbarism. They accused the humans of destroying Zephyrian culture by making their world temporarily uninhabitable. The merchant guilds imposed trade sanctions, calling the radiation treatment environmental terrorism. They claimed the humans were setting a dangerous precedent by using military methods for civilian disasters. The Yith Collective went further, sending a formal protest to the Galactic Council claiming that human Deathworld methods violated civilized standards of planetary assistance. Admiral Chen's response to these protests was broadcast across the galaxy and became legendary for its bluntness. The Zephyrians called for help because they were dying. We answered because that is what civilized beings do. The Etherians offered philosophy. The merchants offered expensive evacuation. The Yith offered to abandon the planet. We offered a solution. If you have a better way to save billions of lives, you should have answered the distress call. The humans ignored all diplomatic pressure and continued their work. They treated the condemnation from other civilizations with the same indifference they showed to radiation and toxic environments. 3 months into the treatment, the results were undeniable. The plague was retreating. Areas that had been sterile wastelands were showing signs of new growth. The crystal forest were beginning to regenerate with structures stronger than the originals. Kithara received daily reports from the human teams on the surface. Dr. Okafor's updates were clinical and precise, but they told an incredible story. Zone 7 is clear of contamination. New crystal growth showing enhanced resistance to biological interference. Zone 12 shows complete pathogen elimination. Soil chemistry returning to optimal levels ahead of schedule. The humans were not just curing the plague. They were making the planet better than it had been before the infection. How is this possible? Dr. Mathera asked during one of the briefings. Dr. Okafor smiled, and for the first time, Kithara saw genuine warmth in the expression. The radiation treatment eliminates harmful organisms but stimulates beneficial ones. The high oxygen levels accelerate healing processes. Your world is not just recovering, it is evolving. Lieutenant Commander Torres added technical details that amazed the Zephyrian scientists. We are also installing environmental monitoring systems that will detect biological threats before they become dangerous. Think of them as an immune system for your planet. But the most shocking revelation came when human engineers began teaching Zephyrian technical teams how to build with hybrid technology, structures that combined traditional biocrystal growth with human engineering methods. Your crystal forests are beautiful, explained Dr. Kim, but they are vulnerable to biological attack because they have no redundancy. We can show you how to grow them with backup systems. The hybrid structures were stronger, more resistant to environmental threats, and capable of surviving disasters that would have destroyed traditional Zephyrian bioarchitecture. You are changing our entire civilization, Kithara observed. Captain Tanaka nodded. Major disasters always change civilizations. The question is whether the change makes you stronger or weaker. We make sure our friends get stronger. As the treatment entered its final phase, Kithara began to understand something profound about these humans. They did not just solve problems, they prevented those problems from happening again. They were teaching her people to survive in a galaxy more dangerous than the Zephyrians had ever imagined. Elder, Admiral Chen said during one of their evening conversations. Your people are intelligent and adaptable. You learn to build with living crystal, to grow cities, to create art that most species cannot even comprehend. But you never learned to fight. We never needed to fight. You do now. The plague that nearly killed your world was not natural. Our analysis suggests it was artificially designed. Someone tried to destroy your civilization. The words hit Kithara like a physical blow. Who would do such a thing? We are still investigating. But the galaxy has predators, Elder. Beautiful, peaceful species like yours are targets. You need to learn to defend yourselves. As Kithara watched her world healing under the strange ministrations of these violent, compassionate humans, she realized that her people's education was just beginning. They had been saved by the very kind of beings they had been taught to fear. Now they would learn to become something they had never imagined being. They would learn to be dangerous. 6 months after the desperate distress call, Kithara stood in the regenerated crystal forest of her homeworld. The trees around her were not quite the same as before. They grew taller, their crystal cores brighter and stronger. The hybrid technology the humans had taught them created forests that sparkled with both biological beauty and engineering resilience. The plague was extinct, not just controlled or contained, completely eliminated. Human analysis had tracked down every trace of the biological weapon and destroyed it at the molecular level, but the cost of salvation had been higher than anyone expected. The other galactic civilizations were furious. The Etherian Philosophy Council had formally condemned Zephyria for abandoning the path of peaceful evolution. They claimed that accepting human methods had corrupted Zephyrian society irreparably. The merchant guilds had imposed complete trade sanctions on both humans and Zephyrians. They refused to deal with any civilization that used Deathworld techniques for problem solving. Most painful of all, the Yith Collective had severed all diplomatic relations. Their final message had been brief and cold. The Zephyrians have chosen barbarism over civilization. We mourn their fall. Kithara walked through the crystal grove where she had first sent the distress call. Admiral Chen walked beside her, preparing for the human fleet's departure. The Admiral moved with the same efficient confidence she had shown throughout the crisis. But Kithara had learned to read the subtle signs of human emotion. You are troubled by the galaxy's reaction, Kithara observed. Admiral Chen shrugged, a human gesture that conveyed indifference mixed with resignation. We expected it. Peaceful civilizations always condemn us until they need us. Then they call us saviors until the crisis is over. Then they condemn us again. Does it hurt to be so misunderstood? Elder, we learned long ago that being right and being popular are two different things. Your people are alive. Your world is healthy. Your civilization will survive. The opinions of comfortable species do not change those facts. They reached the memorial grove where the human teams had honored their dead. 2 humans had died during the cleansing operation. Dr. Martinez from a reactor malfunction, and Specialist Chen from a construction accident. Their names were carved into a crystal monument that would last forever. They died saving people they had never met, Kithara said. People from a species they had never heard of before. That is what humans do, Admiral Chen replied. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even when they hate us for it. The human fleet was preparing to leave, but their impact on Zephyrian society would last forever. Human engineers had taught Zephyrian builders how to create structures that could survive disasters. Human doctors had shown Zephyrian medics techniques for treating previously incurable conditions. Human soldiers had begun training volunteer Zephyrian defense forces. Most importantly, humans had taught the Zephyrians to ask a question they had never considered before. What if someone tries to hurt us again? Dr. Okafor had identified the source of the plague during his final weeks on Zephyria. The biological weapon had been designed by a species called the Karathi, aggressive expansionists who specialized in sterilizing planets for later colonization. They target peaceful civilizations, he had explained to the Zephyrian Council. Species like yours who have valuable worlds but no military defenses. The plague was meant to kill your people while leaving your crystal forests intact. The revelation had shocked the Zephyrians. They had lived for 50,000 years believing that intelligence and gentleness would protect them from harm. The discovery that predators stalked the galaxy had changed their fundamental worldview. What should we do about the Karathi? Council leader Vethan had asked. Admiral Chen's response had been typically human. We are handling them. The Zephyrians never learned exactly what handling them meant, but 3 weeks later, Galactic Communications Networks reported that the Karathi home system had gone dark. Their aggressive expansion had stopped completely. Now, as the human fleet prepared to depart, a delegation of young Zephyrians approached Admiral Chen with a request that would have horrified their ancestors. "Admiral," said Silith, who had been promoted to Chief Communications Officer, "some of us want to come with you. We want to learn human methods. We want to help when the next distress call comes." Admiral Chen studied the young Zephyrians carefully. "You understand what you are asking? Human space is dangerous. Our worlds are hostile. Our work requires you to see suffering and death." "We understand," replied Nimara, one of the engineering students who had worked with human construction teams. "But we also understand that someone must be willing to help when help is needed. The galaxy has predators. Someone must be willing to fight them." Kithara felt a mixture of pride and sadness watching her people volunteer for a life of danger and service. The gentle artistic civilization she had grown up in was changing into something harder and more practical. "Will you take them?" she asked Admiral Chen. "If they pass our training programs. Fair warning, Human Military Academy has a 30% dropout rate, and that is for humans. Your people will find it challenging." Dr. Maithara, who had been quietly listening, spoke up with determination that surprised everyone. "I want to apply for medical training. Human medicine saves lives that our gentle methods cannot touch." One by one, young Zephyrians stepped forward to volunteer. Engineers who wanted to learn human construction techniques. Scientists who wanted to study human biological warfare countermeasures. Even a few who wanted to join human combat units. "You will change," Admiral Chen warned them. "Learning to survive in hostile environments changes how you think, how you feel, how you see the universe. You will not be the same people when you return." "Our world almost died because we were not prepared for danger," Silith replied. "We want to learn to be prepared." As the human ships began their departure sequence, Kithara found herself alone with Admiral Chen in the communication center where the crisis had begun. "Admiral, I must ask you something that has troubled me. Why did you come? The galaxy is vast. You could have ignored our call." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the regenerated crystal forests through the center's windows. "Elder, humans have a saying, evil succeeds when good people do nothing. We learned that lesson on our own world thousands of years ago. We decided that wherever humans go in the galaxy, good people will do something. But the cost to your own people, the cost of not helping, is higher. If we let predators like the Karathi destroy peaceful civilizations, eventually they will grow strong enough to threaten everyone. Better to stop them when they are targeting others than wait for them to target us." Kithara understood then that these humans fought not just for the species they rescued, but for a principle that guided their entire civilization. "Will we see you again?" she asked. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time Kithara saw genuine warmth in the expression. "Elder, you are part of the human sphere of protection now. If anyone threatens Zephyria again, we will know, and we will come." The human fleet departed that evening, their ships disappearing into hyperspace with the same efficiency they had brought to everything else. They left behind a world that was healed, a people who were stronger, and a civilization that would never again face the galaxy unprepared. 3 months later, Zephyria received its first distress call from another species facing extinction. The Gossamer Confederation was dying from a neural plague that was destroying their collective consciousness. The Etherians offered philosophical comfort. The merchant guilds offered expensive evacuation services. The remaining peaceful civilization sent messages of sympathy. Kithara stood in the same communication center where she had once sent a desperate plea for help. Now she was sending a different kind of message. "This is Elder Researcher Kithara of the Zephyrian Republic. We have received your distress call. We are equipped to handle biological threats. Maintain your current position. We are coming to help." The Zephyrian rescue fleet that departed for Gossamer space carried hybrid biocrystal ships designed with human engineering principles. Their medical teams used techniques learned from Dr. Okafor. Their security forces carried weapons that would have horrified their ancestors. As her people departed on their first rescue mission, Kithara reflected on the price of salvation. The galaxy now condemned the Zephyrians as corrupted Deathworlders. The peaceful civilizations they had once called friends now treated them as dangerous outsiders. But somewhere in the galaxy, another species was about to learn that when you call for help, someone will answer, even if that someone had learned to be dangerous. Especially if that someone had learned to be dangerous. Because in a universe full of predators, the only way to protect the innocent was to become something the predators feared more than their prey feared them. The Zephyrians had learned to be human,